On Christmas Day, I held a pregnancy report in my hand, full of excitement, as I hurried to share the good news with my boyfriend, Stephen Jones. But what I didn't expect was to overhear his conversation with two of his friends. "Stephen, you're not seriously planning to marry Cherry, are you? The eldest daughter of the Cooper family has her eyes on you. If you marry Giselle, you'll have everything." "Exactly, Stephen. This is your one and only chance." I stared at Stephen nervously, waiting for his response. After some time, he spoke. "I will break up with Cherry." At that moment, my heart shattered into pieces. Chapter 1. I couldn't remember how I made it back home. Sitting alone in my apartment, Stephen's words kept replaying in my mind like a broken record. Stephen and I were college classmates. In my first year at university, I developed feelings for him. Knowing his family was struggling financially, I pretended to be a poor student too, just to ease his insecurity. During our college years, though life was tough, we were genuinely happy. At that time, I truly believed I had found the person I'd spend the rest of my life with. Even after graduation, when my father urged me to return to the family business, I resolutely refused. I wanted to stay with Stephen and build a future together. But in the end, he betrayed me. It was only then that I realized how foolish I had been. I fell asleep on the couch, and when I woke up, Stephen had returned. The strong smell of alcohol and faint perfume lingered on him. I didn't have to ask to know he had been with Giselle. His eyes were conflicted as he looked at me, but all he said was, "I'm tired," before heading straight to the bedroom to rest. I sat in the living room in silence, watching his retreating figure. Then I made an appointment for an abortion the following day and called my father. "Dad, I'm coming home," I said. My father was overjoyed. After all, he had been hoping for this moment for a long time. "Will you be bringing your boyfriend home with you this time?" he asked with a laugh. Hearing his question, I broke down in tears. I had sacrificed everything for Stephen, but the only thing that I got was his betrayal. My father was alarmed by my sobs, repeatedly asking what had happened and offering to come to me immediately. But I refused. I assured him I would handle everything before returning home. After hanging up, I packed my belongings and left a note for Stephen. The next day, I went through with the procedure. The sympathetic gazes from the nurses cut through me like knives, but I forced myself to stay composed. As I lay on the hospital bed afterward, my phone rang. It was Stephen. "Cherry, where did you go?" His voice was laced with anger. "What does your note mean? Are you breaking up with me?" I let out a soft laugh. "Stephen, isn't this what you wanted? You chose Giselle long ago, didn't you?" My words silenced him on the other end of the line. After a moment, he lowered his voice and asked, "How do you know about Giselle?" Hearing I didn't answer, Stephen anxiously said, "Cherry, it's not what you think." I chuckled coldly, then ended the call. I no longer had the energy to entangle myself with Stephen. I called my father again to confirm my return. This time, he came to pick me up personally. When he saw me, his eyes were filled with pain and concern. Chapter 2. I could see the pain in my father's eyes as he brought me back home and urged me to rest. During this time, he took great care of me, and little by little, I began to move on from Stephen. But one day, while scrolling through my social media feed, I stumbled upon a post that stopped me in my tracks. It was a picture of Stephen and Giselle at their engagement party. In the photo, Giselle was heavily pregnant, holding onto Stephen's arm with a triumphant smile. I stared at her round belly and chuckled bitterly. So this was the truth. Stephen and Giselle had been together all along. She was already carrying his child. To keep me distracted, my father suggested I start working at the company. Since I was new, my workload was light. One day, my secretary informed me about an upcoming business gala that I needed to attend. I agreed without giving it much thought, never imagining that I would run into Stephen there. He arrived at the event with Giselle on his arm. When his eyes met mine, his expression turned complicated, while Giselle looked at me with unmistakable arrogance. "You must be Cherry Adams," she said, her tone condescending. I nodded. "Yes, that's me." "I didn't expect your company to send you for this collaboration," Giselle sneered. "You know, I'm quite close with your company's CEO. In fact, the eldest daughter of your family is one of my best friends. I blinked at her, then smiled politely. Her claim was laughable. This was the first time I'd met her, so how could she claim that we were best friends? Besides, our family status was leagues above hers. The Cooper family had begged for this collaboration, and even then, I wasn't sure if it would go through. As the wealthiest family in the province, we held all the cards. Giselle's display of superiority was clearly aimed at humiliating me, but I chose not to react. Behind me, my assistant seemed ready to speak up, but I motioned for her to stay quiet. Stephen walked over, his expression conflicted. "Cherry, why did you leave without a word?" I smiled faintly. "I was just making space for you and Giselle." My response made his face darken further. "Cherry, you know I came from the countryside," he said after a pause. "If I want a better life, I have to hold on to someone like Giselle." I nodded. "You're right. Your choice makes perfect sense." My calm acknowledgement seemed to unsettle him even more. "Cherry, after you left, I went looking for you," he said bitterly. "I know you went to the hospital." "Stephen, I'm grateful." I interrupted him coldly. "I realized back then that you weren't the right person for me. Walking away was the best decision I could have made. Otherwise, I'd probably end up being used by you until there was nothing left of me." My words struck a nerve, and his expression turned even uglier. I handed the rest of the evening's matters to my secretary and left the venue without another word. Just being around the two of them soured my mood. It was better to avoid unnecessary contact. After I left, my secretary reported that Giselle continued her high-handed behavior, even going as far as publicly claiming to be my best friend. I laughed at the absurdity and instructed my secretary to tolerate her for now. As for the collaboration, as long as I'm here, it won't happen, I said decisively. That evening, Stephen called me. "Cherry, let's meet," he said. I rejected him without hesitation. "Stephen, there's nothing left for us to discuss." Chapter 3. "Stephen, there's nothing left for us to discuss." I spoke coldly, my voice devoid of emotion. But on the other end of the line, Stephen responded quickly. "Cherry, you wouldn't want the collaboration between our families to fall through, would you?" I laughed at his words. Did he not realize that whether or not our companies collaborated was entirely up to me? Stephen had no leverage in this matter. What I didn't expect was that after I rejected him, he barged into my office the very next day. "Mr. Jones," I said coolly, "isn't it rather impolite of you to storm into my office uninvited?" I gestured for my secretary to leave, leaving only the two of us in the room. Stephen's eyes reddened slightly as he looked at me. "Cherry, when you left, I went looking for you. Did you abort our child?" His voice trembled with anger. I stared at the fury in his eyes and laughed, incredulous. "So, this is why you're here?" I said icily. "You want an answer? Fine. I didn't want my child to grow up without a father. Does that satisfy you?" My words seemed to drain the color from his face. "Cherry, you and I both came from nothing. You know how hard it is for people like us to climb up the ladder," he said. "I agreed to marry Giselle, but I never intended to give you up." His declaration was laughable. "And what's your point?" I asked, my voice cold and unyielding. "Cherry, I still love you." "I don't love Giselle," he said. "If you come back, we can still have a future together. Even have our child. My marriage to Giselle is just a stepping stone for us." Hearing his shameless justification, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Leave, Stephen," I said, pointing to the door. At that moment, whatever lingering fantasies or warmth I had for him shattered completely. I had been blind to see his true nature. He looked at me with desperation. "Cherry, do you even know how close Giselle is to your company's boss? All it would take is one word from her, and you'd lose your job. Cherry, you'd better listen to me. If she ruins your career, you'll still have me to rely on." His words were so absurd that they were almost comical. "No need, Stephen," I said firmly. "Rest assured, no matter what happens, I'll never come to you for help." Before I could escort him out, the door to my office slammed open again. This time it was Giselle. She stormed in, her eyes blazing with fury. I knew it. You're the vixen trying to seduce my husband. I looked at her coldly and said, I have no interest in your husband. Both of you, please leave. Leave, she screeched. We came here for a business collaboration, not so you could seduce my man. She continued shouting, Where's your boss? I demand to see him right now. I'll make sure you're fired. Her tantrum was pathetic, and I watched her with icy disdain. Stephen rushed to her side, trying to calm her down. Giselle, let's leave. There's nothing between me and Cherry. Chapter 4. Stephen reached out, trying to pull Giselle away. But before he could, she slapped him hard across the face. Stephen, I married you because I pitied you. And now you dare to cheat on me? She yelled, hitting him repeatedly while berating him. Stephen lowered his head, retreating step by step under her assault. Watching this unfold, I shook my head. The Stephen I once knew was confident and ambitious. Now he was reduced to this pitiful state. I observed their scene coldly and gave my secretary a subtle signal to call security. She quietly stepped aside with a phone in hand. As Giselle landed slap after slap, Stephen stood there, humiliated. A sense of ironic satisfaction washed over me. Thank goodness I hadn't married him. At that moment, I felt nothing but relief for seeing his true colors before it was too late. Suddenly, Giselle turned her anger toward me, glaring as she screamed, It's all your fault, you vixen. You seduced my husband. She lunged at me, ready to attack. I wasn't Stephen. The moment she came close, I slapped her hard across the face. The slap echoed in the room. Both Giselle and Stephen froze in shock. Recovering first, Stephen grabbed my arm, his voice rising in anger. Cherry, what are you doing? Do you realize you just hit Giselle? You could lose your job for this. He glared at me, demanding, Apologize to her now. I smiled faintly, pulling my arm free. She came at me first, I said calmly. Giselle, livid, screamed, I want to see your CEO. I'll make sure you're fired. She stared at me fiercely and shouted, You're dead, vixen. Her rage amused me, but I shook my head. My patience with these two was running out. Cherry, stop this nonsense. Stephen scolded. You don't know, do you? Giselle's best friend is the daughter of your company's boss. One word from her, and you're out. I narrowed my eyes at him. Are you sure about that? Last time I checked, I was my father's only child. When did I get a best friend? Moreover, if I were really close to Giselle, wouldn't she already know who I am? Just then, Giselle turned to my secretary, barking orders. Our family came here to collaborate. If you don't fire this woman today, we're pulling out of the deal. Understood, I said abruptly. She paused, looking smug, but I continued. From this moment on, the Addams family will never collaborate with the Cooper family again. Turning to my secretary, I added, Spread the word. All business dealings with the Cooper family are terminated immediately. Yes, President Addams, my secretary replied crisply. Chapter 5. My words stunned both Stephen and Giselle. Giselle sneered. Who do you think you are? Do you really think you can call the shots on a collaboration between our families? Cherry, stop being ridiculous, Stephen chimed in, as if trying to salvage the situation. I glanced at them, bored of their antics. Ms. Cooper, please leave. It's effective immediately. Our company has ceased all partnerships with yours. The room fell silent, except for Giselle's indignant sputtering. But I was already done paying them any attention. As soon as I finished speaking, Giselle suddenly charged at me and slapped me hard across the face. Who do you think you are? Cancel the collaboration just because you said so, she shouted furiously. Do you even know I'm best friend with your company's heiress? Her words were full of arrogance and rage, but I remained calm. Turning to my secretary, I instructed, Call security and report this to the police for assault. The secretary quickly dialed the security department, her movements efficient and deliberate. Meanwhile, Giselle, emboldened, glared at me smugly. I'm calling my father right now. He'll talk to your CEO, and you 11 be fired before you know it. Cherry, Begging me now won't help you. You'll lose everything soon, she added, her voice dripping with venom. I shook my head at her cluelessness. She and Stephen had no idea who they were dealing with, and I had no interest in explaining it to them. Without further delay, I asked my secretary to proceed with the police report. Unfazed, Giselle pulled out her phone and began calling her father, confidence radiating from her. At the same time, Stephen approached me, his tone cold and commanding. Cherry, stop this nonsense and apologize to Giselle immediately. I glanced at him, unimpressed. This man didn't even warrant my acknowledgement anymore. But Stephen, seeing my indifference, grabbed my arm and snarled. I'm warning you, Cherry. Apologize to my wife now. I met his gaze coldly. Why should I apologize, Stephen? It's for your own good, he shot back, lowering his voice. It's also for our future. His words were laughable. I merely smiled. Faintly, not bothering to respond further. To me, Stephen was nothing now, a meaningless figure of the past. Moments later, Giselle strutted over to me, triumphant. I've already spoken to my father. He's contacting your CEO right now. You as good as fired. Beg all you want now, it won't make a difference, she sneered. You poor wretches will never understand how just one word from me can ruin everything for you. I watched her with amusement, but said nothing. Her words held no weight. Soon, security arrived. Without hesitation, they restrained both Giselle and Stephen. What are you doing? Giselle screeched in outrage. I'm a VIP guest of your CEO. Do you even know who you messing with? The security team remained silent. Everyone in the company knew I was the future successor, so their loyalty was firmly on my side. As Giselle struggled, my father's call came through. Cherry, did that Cooper family girl cause trouble at our company? He asked, his tone displeased. I explained the situation, detailing Giselle's behavior. My father's response was immediate and resolute. In that case, terminate all collaborations with the Cooper family. They relied on us for too long anyway. The Cooper family had been struggling for years, barely managing to secure business deals with my father as help. Yet here was Giselle, waltzing into our company and wreaking havoc as if she owned the place, even going so far as to demand my dismissal. Such audacity would not go unpunished. Cherry, do you even know what you're redoing? Giselle shrieked at me, her face twisted with rage. I'll call your CEO myself. I'll have you fired. I'll call my best friend right now. Her empty threats hung in the air, but I remained unmoved, watching her tantrum with detached amusement. She still didn't understand she was utterly powerless. Chapter 6. Giselle's shrill voice echoed through the room, her emotions running wild. I looked at her coldly and asked, Go ahead, make the call. I'd love to know who this best friend of yours is. My words left her stunned. Deep down, she knew she had no connection to the Addams family heiress. She didn't even know my name. Giselle had simply assumed that if she came to this company, meeting the Addams family heiress would automatically make them close friends. That blind confidence had fueled her arrogance. Giselle, I said with a chilling tone, I wasn't aware we were such good friends. Her face froze in shock as she turned to look at me. Cherry, what are you talking about? Stephen, standing nearby, was equally dumbfounded. You from a remote mountain village, aren't you? I couldn't help but laugh at his naivety. I'm actually grateful I let you believe that back then. If you'd known the truth, I'm sure you would schemed against me even harder. With that, I turned to the security guards and ordered, throw them out. And make it clear that our company will never collaborate with the Cooper family again. Giselle began to struggle, but her resistance was futile. Security swiftly escorted her and Stephen out of the building. Later that day, my family publicly announced the termination of all business dealings with the Cooper family. The Cooper family had been teetering on the edge of collapse, but now, their downfall was inevitable. Initially, they had borrowed substantial amounts of money, and their creditors assumed that their partnership with our family would ensure eventual repayment. However, the current circumstances shattered that illusion. It became clear to everyone that the Cooper family's ability to repay was little more than a distant dream. As a result, creditors wasted no time in demanding repayment. In an instant, the Cooper family was plunged into a full-blown economic crisis with no path to recovery in sight. What surprised me was the call I received from Stephen that evening. "Cherry, I know I was wrong," he pleaded. "I know you still love me. Can we start over?" I responded coldly, "Stephen, we've been over for a long time. Don't call me again." Without waiting for his reply, I ended the call and immediately blocked his number. I had completely given up on him. Not just given up, I was utterly disgusted. He was a man unworthy of even my contempt. A few days later, to my surprise, the Cooper family came to the company again. This time, Giselle brought her father, and Stephen trailed behind them. Stephen's gaze was conflicted as it met mine, while Giselle's was filled with hatred. Giselle's father approached me with a forced smile. "You must be Miss Adams," he said. "I'm an old friend of your father's." I simply smiled politely, saying nothing. The Cooper family had a habit of making unfounded claims, just like Giselle had claimed to be my best friend. Noticing my silence, Mr. Cooper's smile grew more awkward. "Miss Adams," he began, "I just recently learned about what happened between you and Stephen. Our Giselle loves him deeply and didn't mean to take him from you. If this is the reason our collaboration has been affected, we are willing to have Giselle and Stephen divorce." Chapter 7. Mr. Cooper looked at me. His face was gleaming with a hint of desperation. Hearing his words, I froze for a moment. I had never even considered taking Stephen back. In fact, such garbage suited the Cooper family perfectly. The desperation in his voice was clear, but it was far too late for the Cooper family to make amends. I quickly shook my head. "There's no need. Stephen and I have nothing to do with each other anymore. Right now, I couldn't wish for anything more than for him to stay far, far away from me." Hearing my response, Mr. Cooper looked visibly taken aback. He hesitated before asking, "Then, Miss Adams, about the cooperation between our families?" "Apologies," I interrupted firmly, "but cooperation between our two families is simply no longer possible." I looked at Mr. Cooper and added calmly, "After all, we can easily find much better partners to work with." As my words sank in, Mr. Cooper's face turned pale. Anger flashed in his eyes as he grabbed the cane he was holding and swung it hard at Stephen. A cry of pain escaped Stephen as he collapsed to the floor. Without hesitation, Mr. Cooper continued striking him with the cane. "You're a useless fool. How dare you offend Miss Adams?" he shouted with every strike, occasionally glancing at me, as if expecting me to show some hint of concern. I understood his ploy. He likely thought that beating Stephen in front of me might tug at my heartstrings. But how could I possibly care about a man like that? In stark contrast, Giselle's face twisted in anguish as she watched her beloved getting beaten. "Mr. Cooper," I said with a faint smile, "if you must discipline your son-in-law, please do so at home. This is a business, not a place for brawls." My words deepened the embarrassment on Mr. Cooper's face. Left with no choice, he helped Stephen up and led him away. As they departed, Stephen turned to me, his eyes filled with pleading desperation. I ignored him entirely, indifferent to his plight. Later that evening, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. It was one of Stephen's friends. "Cherry, you need to come see Stephen. The Cooper family beat him so badly, he's been hospitalized. Please, I know you still care about him. He needs you right now." Hearing this, I chuckled lightly and replied, "In that case, I wish him a speedy recovery." I was about to hang up when the voice on the other end grew agitated. "Cherry, what do you mean by that? Stephen got beaten up because of you, and you're just going to do nothing?" I replied coldly, "What does he have to do with me? ISNT his wife Giselle, not me. But you can't just abandon him. Stephen loved you for so many years. Don't tell me those years meant nothing to you." I laughed softly at his words. "If you truly cared about the years I spent with him, you wouldn't have been the one advising him to give up on me back then." Silence followed on the other end. My words had clearly struck a nerve. With that, I ended the call and blocked the number. Stephen regretted everything. I knew that much. He had taken to calling me every day, trying to apologize. Each time I saw his number, I blocked it without hesitation. I had no idea how many new numbers he used to contact me, but eventually, I managed to silence him for good. For me, Stephen was nothing but a chapter firmly closed in my life. As for the Cooper family, without the backing of my family's company, their debt crisis fully unraveled. Mr. Cooper frantically searched for new investors, but no one was willing to work with them anymore. Their family's fortune crumbled, leaving them on the brink of bankruptcy. Chapter 8. Not long after Stephen was discharged from the hospital, Giselle brought him back to the Cooper family. When Mr. Cooper saw him, he became enraged again and, wielding his cane, beat Stephen so severely that he ended up back in the hospital with even graver injuries. Giselle, overcome with pity, tried desperately to stop her father. However, in the chaos, Mr. Cooper shoved her to the ground. Her stomach hit the edge of a table, and she began to bleed profusely. Tragically, she lost the baby. Stephen's friend called me once again, begging for my help. Cherry, if you don't step in, Stephen might be beaten to death by the Cooper family. Hearing this, I couldn't help but laugh. That would be perfect. At least then, he wouldn't bother me anymore. With that, I hung up the phone. After Giselle lost the baby, the Cooper family directed all their fury towards Stephen. While still recovering in the hospital, he was dragged back to the GU residence in the middle of the night, where he suffered another brutal beating. This time, the injuries were fatal. Stephen was beaten to death. When Mr. Cooper realized he had killed someone, he panicked and fled overseas. As for Giselle, upon learning that her husband was dead and her child was gone, she completely lost her mind. She was admitted to a psychiatric hospital the same day. The last call I received was from Stephen's parents. Years ago, I had met them when Stephen brought me home. Back then, he promised to love me for a lifetime. He even joked that if he ever stopped loving me, he would meet a tragic end. Now, it seemed that his words had come true. Over the phone, Stephen's mother wept bitterly. She apologized repeatedly, saying she never imagined things would turn out this way. She told me that when Stephen decided to leave me to marry Giselle, they had strongly opposed it, but he insisted on going through with it. I didn't offer any comfort. Instead, I simply told her, what's between Stephen and me ended long ago. And now, I'm incredibly grateful that I never married him. They eventually took Stephen's body away. As for Giselle, they didn't bother to intervene. The Cooper family fell into complete ruin overnight. Their company was sold off to pay debts, but even that wasn't enough to cover what they owed. Mr. Cooper had borrowed heavily, and after the company's liquidation, a significant amount of debt remained. A few months later, I became more familiar with the company's operations and began taking over most of my father's responsibilities. One day, my father informed me that Mr. Cooper had been killed overseas. He explained that the Cooper family's creditors had tracked Mr. Cooper down abroad. When he failed to repay the money he owed, they lost control and beat him to death. Hearing this, I was momentarily surprised, but quickly realized it wasn't all that unexpected. After all, he had beaten Stephen to death, only to meet the same fate himself. Perhaps this was karma in its purest form.